Saturday, November 17th, 2018. I'm Justin Castelli, and this is Mike Philbrick. I've got a buddy of mine in for the weekend. We're going to do some podcasting, some more videos, some weightlifting. But he joined me today for the weekend review. We only have a few things so we can get to our other things, so let's get into it real quick.
Awesome.
First thing up on this week in the news impacting your financial planning and investments. Some readings coming out of the international markets showing international economies are slowing relative to the U.S., which is still growing. So why bring this up? Well, if you watch these and read me, you know I'm a big believer in global diversification, and I believe Mike is as well.
Huge believer.
We were talking about last night.
First line of defense.
So not necessarily anything that I would say you need to take action on, but just be aware. I'm going through reviews right now with clients, and part of the conversation is we have a diversified portfolio, and here's this part of our portfolio that's not doing well, the international areas, and this is just showing that maybe it's not going to change anytime soon. Doesn't mean I am deviating away from being globally diversified. So don't make changes, but just wanted to put that on the radar. Yeah. You got any extra comments?
Yeah, you have to, the U.S. is obviously a very large part of the market capitalization of the world, sort of half of the market cap. But when it comes to GDP, emerging markets is 50%, and the U.S. is only 16% of global GDP. Global GDP is just fancy words for how much the economies actually produce. Right, so you have smaller stock markets, but much larger businesses in those international areas of the world, which is why you want to have allocations to those areas of the world, regardless of the ebbs and flows. That's diversity. That's why you do that.
He's a smart man. Listen to him. Next up, oil. Prices of oil are falling. I haven't really noticed it yet at the pump. I'm sure that's going to happen. Again, another international type of event. A lot to do with Saudi Arabia and everything going on over there. But just, we've never really talked about commodities in this kind of area on these weekend reviews, but it is something that's happening. If you follow the markets, if you're watching CNBC, they've been talking about it a lot. So just wanted to mention that oil is falling, and hey, if it happens to drive prices down at the tank for Christmas and Hanukkah and all the other holidays, that's not a bad thing because that'll help the GDP, at least of the U.S. What do you have on oil?
A couple of things. One is another area of diversification, right? So that's the diversification we don't like right now because we got the downside. It was one of the best performing assets globally prior to this slide. This slide was also the most rapid slide in oil, I believe, ever.
Okay.
So the rapidity of this slide in the price of oil is unprecedented. And maybe speaks to some of the unintended consequences of Fed policy with providing pretty low interest rates, pretty easy access to money. We've seen this sort of phenomenon repeat itself a few times over the last year or years, where we have these pretty large outsized events. And one wonders if it's not sort of a consequence of that easy money. But we don't know, but it's okay. You diversify and you drive on.
And I'm glad you mentioned the Fed because next up is measurements of inflation show that it ticked up over the last month. So it ticked up a dramatic 0.3%. And I say dramatic because if you read the headlines, it's the most since January. Not a huge jump, but a reason I say that's good with the Fed is we've talked about it a lot on this weekly reviews that the Fed is monitoring inflation, and that's why they're making adjustments with interest rates. Expectations are continued that they will raise again in December, and with inflation ticking up, that gives them more reason to do so, to try to keep that in control.
Interesting. I don't know if you saw, is it Clarida, one of the Fed chair, mentioned that they may actually take their foot off of the gas a little bit because of the concerns about international and emerging markets. And if you have a drop in oil prices or commodity prices, although that's great for the U.S., it's not particularly great for those commodity producing emerging market nations. And you can cause some imbalances. So the one Fed chair was saying we might actually not accelerate that hiking persona.
So not to get too political, but I've had this conversation with a lot of people, and I'm not a Fed expert.
No, me either.
I don't love politics, but I do think that the Fed almost has to raise in December because that's what they said for so long. And my fear, which I'm not the only person, and I genuinely do think this, not stealing other people's ideas, I think with what has come out of the White House, as far as being unsatisfied and not liking what the Fed is doing, they've almost been painted in a corner that they have to raise, because if they don't raise, then the narrative now becomes, well, they didn't raise in December, because of what came out of DC, and you
Sure.
can't have that. So I almost feel like December, 100%. Put all your money on that. Not really, but I think that's the case. And then next year, then they can have the ability to kind of pump things up because they can come out with their commentary and say,
Yep.
well, we raised in December, but now given everything else, we have decided we're going to monitor and do it with no
Yeah.
schedule.
This is obviously the first of the trial balloon.
Right.
The Fed is really good at floating these trial balloons and sort of testing the market and seeing what the feedback is. And so I, you know, who knows if December's a lock? I'm certainly, I would acquiesce to you on that. Fine. But I think as we move through, we've seen the first trial balloon that says, you know, maybe we'll, you know, we might not.
Right.
We still might, but we might not. So.
That's enough on inflation, but we've talked about it a lot, so I just wanted to give an update on that, and you may read about it. And then finally, nothing related with planning, but Amazon picked its 2 headquarters. It's going to be in New York and North Virginia, close to D.C. Indianapolis was actually in the running. To be honest, I knew we were not going to make it for social reasons. We won't go into those, but I knew Indianapolis wasn't going to get it. And if you read a lot of the commentary, there's a lot of negative that's being highlighted from having an Amazon headquarters as far as like rents going up, and it's not going to bring jobs for the people in the community. It's going to bring people to the community, which causes issues there. So it's kind of interesting how all of these, you know, cities and states wanted to get it, which it could have some unintended consequences that may not be good for their people.
Yeah, always does.
So that's the last piece of news. Anything you wanted to throw out there for the weekend review?
No, I think we've covered it well.
All right, awesome. Well, that is it for this week's Week in Review. Be sure to check out all of the mixtape articles below. Another great week of writing. And subscribe to everything, YouTube, the blog, the podcast, so you don't miss out on anything. He's going to be doing a lot of content with me today. We've got 2 podcasts, another video. Going to be a good day. So we'll let you get to your weekend, and we'll see you in the next episode.